Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar, which is called Transforming Child Protection Services Using Co-production and Co-design. On reflection, it's probably a slightly audacious title for a webinar, but we wanted to talk about some of the principles, some of the theory and some of the practice that we've been using that's been underpinned by co-production and co-design. And so this presentation today is going to be divided into three parts. First, I'm going to offer an overview of a recent project that we've been involved in Baines. Then we're going to look into the theory and the research and some of the underlying principles. And then at the final third, Tim is going to offer some reflections and share his experiences from some of the work that he's been doing. So just to introduce ourselves quickly, my name's Devine and I'm a social worker at Bath and North East Somerset Council. Tim, did you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, I'm Tim Fisher and I work for Camden Council, and nice to be with you. Thanks for viewing this webinar. It's a hot day outside and we're hot for this topic. We're really passionate about co-design and child protection, so look forward to more conversations about this topic with you.
Nice, thanks Tim. So part one, an overview of a project that I was involved in called Voices for Change. So during a restructure we had at Bath and North East Somerset Council, Lee Zywick, who I say this every time I get an opportunity, is one of the most inspiring and innovative social workers I've met, and much of the work I'm going to be talking about today wouldn't have been possible without her. So we were discussing the role of family support workers, and we wondered whether there was a mismatch between how family support workers supported families and the type of support that families would want or feel that they need. So following on from this, we had a discussion with family support workers about the type of support and help that they offered families. And this, it could be divided into four broad themes. The first one was parent education. The second was relationship work between the parent and the child. The third was practical support, for example, budgeting, charity applications. And then the fourth element was emotional support. And during this discussion, the family support workers identified a few challenges in their work. Firstly, the plan of work is given to them often by the social worker and often not done in conjunction with the parents. Secondly, they're often asked to do work on routine and boundaries. When they go to meet the family, however, it often became apparent to them that the parents had far greater problems and far more urgent issues that they needed help with. Issues around being in a domestically abusive relationship, substance misuse issues, serious poor mental health issues, issues around housing. And so it was felt that some of these more pressing and urgent problems, if resolved, would actually reduce the need for work around routine and boundaries. Thirdly, whilst they recognised that parents would benefit from more intensive, longer-term, emotional and practical support, this was often not encouraged or supported, and often they didn't have the time, even if it was supported and encouraged. So the work undertaken by family support workers, therefore, ended up being heavily organised around parent education and improving the parent-child relationship. So we wanted to improve our understanding of what constitutes meaningful family support. And so we teamed up with Professor Louise Brown from Bath University to think about how we could do some research within this area. And we took to our conversation with Louise the inspiring and impressive work we had seen undertaken by Becca Dove and her project on family support, Changemakers. And Changemakers was a participatory design project that brought together Camden parents and family members with service design master's students from the University of the Arts, London College of Communication, to create a design vision for good help following COVID. And so the parents and the students had kind of worked together to describe how good help should feel and what good help should be, and create a set of design concepts to bring that vision to life. So we proposed to Louise that we'd undertake some participatory sessions with parents who had previously had child protection involvement, and as part of that had a family support worker. And what we were interested in, what we wanted to explore, was what they found helpful, what they didn't find helpful, and to think about, if they were to design the perfect type of family support, what would that look like? If they could allow themselves to be freed in their imagination, in terms of, because often what you think about in terms of support is often tied to what's kind of available in a pre-existing way. And so we wanted to help them be creative and open-ended in if they were to design this type of support, what would that fundamentally look like? So we wanted a process that would be fun, engaging, participatory and creative. And furthermore, we wanted the process to be as important as the outcome. Professor Louise Brown instantly understood the intention of the project, and she ignited a passion and a tenacious kind of willingness to assist. And as a kind of highly regarded professor, she was able to use her knowledge, skills and links to set up the project. She researched funding streams and helped us to complete funding applications and plan the project. She was able to eventually secure a small grant from the Public Engagement Fund at Bath University, which we used mostly to commission a local charity that employs artists to deliver creative wellbeing projects to run and coordinate the sessions. And then she also identified 2 social work students to assist in coordinating the workshops. So the project would have absolutely not been possible without her. So our intention was to invite 12 parents, and this was the part that I was responsible for, and I massively underestimated how long it would take to identify parents who could take part and would be willing to take part. So initially I'd sent out a poster to all of the social workers across the local authority, advertising that we were going to do this project, and I'd anticipate that would suffice in terms of parents being identified. However, this only resulted in a handful of names. So in the end, I ended up having to take a more proactive, deliberate and systematic approach. And I rang, I think, between 40 and 50 parents in the end. Some didn't answer, many did answer and were polite, yet weren't interested. And so in the end, there were approximately 12 to 13 that were keen to participate. We always knew that there would be a relatively high rate of dropout, just because people's lives are busy and they often still have difficulties. And so for various different reasons, we started the project, and by that point we had 5 women. So we sought to take care of the practicalities, and here's some of the images from the Voices for Change project. So we arranged taxis for them to attend the first session, because we thought it was important to alleviate any stress or worry that they might have of using public transport, especially because we thought it's the first session, so there might be a degree of anxiety. In the end, we ended up paying for taxis for all of the sessions, although one of the parents preferred to catch a bus and one made their own way there. We selected a nice venue that we thought showed respect for the women participating. We provided lunch, even though the session was only for a couple of hours. We thought that providing lunch or food is an act of care, and sharing lunch, as most people will know, can often be an intimate and bonding experience. And then we also paid for the women's time in vouchers, including their travel time. And we contacted each of the women in between the sessions to check in and ask if they needed any support or assistance attending the subsequent session. So the project was then underway, and this was led by a really wonderful, talented, engaging artist called Jill Carter, and two really lovely, thoughtful social work students, Jill Lapping and Chelsea Westwood. So this is just one of the images that was put together by the artist Jill Carter. And here you just see some of the reflections of some of the women that was being brought up in this discussions. So you can see here they talked about not being listened to, the sense that their socioeconomic states affected how they were dealt with, that they felt judged, and the lens that they were seen through by professionals and perceived views of them and their family. And here's some of the ideas for change that some of the women talked about, again documented by Jill Carter. So some of these ideas include respite for families, peer support was a big one, and I think that was partly because this was a peer-led project, and so some of the women could see the value by coming together and talking about how they would like family support to be different and being able to share their past experiences. Long-term family support was a big one. And then one of the things I really like in this image is that in the image to the right, where it says at the bottom, can the system change? It's a question, and then the answer is yes, because we can. And so there's something about the parents saying, if we can change, then we believe that the system can change and do better. And I just want to share with you some of the video that was used as part of this. See if I can. Just get it up for you, get it to the right point.
Because you get treated as an equal, you're listened to, meet me before reading about me, respect me, I'm funny, and I want a funny life, and I want to have the funny part of everything in my life all over my kids. Like, my kids have to have this happy, funny life. It's something that I never had when I was growing up.
So people see me do these things, but they don't actually know that that's actually what I'm going through. And I'm still going through it now. See me trying, you see me hoping, you see me living. And then this one is, you don't see my pain, you don't see my trauma, you don't see me crying, you don't see me giving up, you don't see my torture, you don't see my sleepless nights, you don't see me. You don't see me dying. I've never expressed myself on paper before. It's always been in my head.
So some kind of really powerful, moving reflections there. I really love that idea of being funny and wanting a funny life. It kind of brings the kind of humanity of what she wants for her children and for herself. And then I'll just show you a minute from where they talk about some of the recommendations.
This research project is really about how you can draw on your experiences and say, for other parents, how could the best practice be brought to for other people? You said somebody believed in you and that made a difference.
Open days to promote the service a bit better.
Open days to promote social services or family support.
Yeah, family support. Mostly in the communities, to say that social services are there and not just there to take children away.
So highlight their positive, highlight the services, positive interventions. Mm-hmm. Yeah? How could family services better help you?
Listen to me.
Why aren't they listening right now?
They are, at the moment, they're blaming my anxiety, the reason why he doesn't want to go to school.
So would you have liked someone to step in earlier to actually look at the dynamics of what was happening and sort of speak up on your behalf, or?
Yeah, because nobody knows why he's feeling this.
Right. So an advocate.
Because they've also got a bad habit of giving you a temporary support worker and then changing it really quickly again. And I hate that. That's one of my biggest anxiety things. Short
intervention.
I don't see how that's a short term's ever been helpful for me. I don't know about other people, but I don't think short term like that has ever helped me.
That's just a few snippets from the video that the women produced together.
Very powerful, Rich.
Yeah, and what was striking was, I suppose, how much they were willing to share in such a short amount of time together. Because in total we did 6 sessions, so they really shared a lot of their most intimate, difficult parts of their lives, and were really excited to be part of a project where they felt they could influence the way in which services were delivered for other parents who might find themselves in a similar position to what they found themselves in. So here's some of the comments of what some of the mothers who took part said. So Sophie talked about it was invaluable when the social worker asked, "How can I help?" And for her, she felt that long-term support, family support had been invaluable, and she thought that peer groups would be a good idea. Laura talked about to be respected by the family support worker is really important. So that personalities can be different, but to find ways to understand each other, and both parties being open to change and being able to take constructive criticism. And I thought this is a really key part, which was a kind of theme that came up again and again, was around being supported by a person rather than just the system. And Lambie talked about these sessions as being the best therapeutic intervention I've ever had, which wasn't the intention of the project, but it's a really lovely unintended positive consequence. So what's next? So the mothers have produced this video illustrating the process of the workshops as well as their recommendations. And so the plan now is for them to share the video with senior managers and leaders in Baines before then sharing it with the family support team. And we hope to support the group to think about how they can prompt support workers to adapt their way of working and consider the role that they could have in shaping and implementing support for parents. And so really we're taking it from a kind of an exercise in co-production into potentially co-design. And so, yeah, that's what we, and we'll talk about the distinction between the two next, actually. So we're going to move now into the second phase of the kind of presentation. And we're just going to switch up so that Tim has control of the slide now.
Yeah, so I'm just going to get the slides up here. Okay. All right, so yeah, what is co-design? I think this is a really useful illustrative quote, and it's from one of the key texts for us on co-design, Kellyanne McKercher of Beyond Sticky Notes. Some of you might have seen this. A couple of books that have really influenced us, and we've been reading a lot around the topic. Because we wanted really to look at what's been written about co-design, co-production in other worlds, in other fields, and then look at how that applies to the child protection context and our child protection context, the English context too. So this is a good one, Beyond Sticky Notes. So this is an Australian Kilian McKirch is based in Australia. And then we've got Sasha Constanza-Chock, who's written this brilliant book, and this is a movement worldwide actually, of people around design justice, and that's a great one. I just wanted to highlight one book from the UK, and this is Kerry Facier and Brian E. Enright, and Professor Kerry Facier does some really excellent work around co-design in education and around climate change as well. So that's a really great one. I like the title of this as well, Creating Living Knowledge. I think that film that we just saw with Rich, that really felt like it was alive, didn't it? Alive with people and thinking and feeling as well. Kilian McKirch says, co-design is an approach to designing with, not for people. It involves sharing power, prioritizing relationships, and using participatory means and building capability.
And so co-design is described as a kind of creative method to work with people to bring about social change. And at the heart of this approach is working collaboratively with others, especially those usually on the receiving end of services. So just as in the case we talked about, parents who normally have family support services are now, instead of just being on the receiving end of those, they're coming into a conversation about what those family support services could look like and how they could be different. And so this approach kind of dramatically changes the power dynamics and the role of professionals. Typically, professionals working with people, they identify a concern and then they try to fix the concerns or the issues with a solution that they or the service they work for has already devised. Co-design, in contrast to that, positions people as experts in their own life and situation. So instead of being passive recipients of help, they're invited to participate in a conversation about the help that they receive from professionals. And then through creative and participatory dialogue, they explore and identify needs and develop, deliver and test solutions. So co-design can be considered a process underpinned by principles and undertaken with a set of practical tools, is illustrated in this image here. And this is from Emma Bloomkamp, who has a really brilliant, accessible and engaging website with loads of resources, just setting out the kind of 3 stages of the process, the principles and the practical tools. Do you want to move on to the next slide, please, Tim? Co-production or co-design. We just thought we'd mention something about this because when we looked at the literature, there's various descriptions of co-design and co-production. Some consider that the two terms distinctly different, whereas others think that they have overlapping features or that co-production is one element of co-design. So for our purposes, we will consider co-production referring to one phase within co-design, namely the part that involves the implementation of the solution.
Yeah, and another vivid description here of co-design from Boyle. It is a method by which public services tap into the abundance of human assets, enabling them to flourish and expand, and then bringing them into play, complementing and augmenting the publicly funded resources of the welfare state. And I think emphasising that it's a two-way process, that the state is resourcing communities as well as communities being a resource for the state is an important one for us. And we started to think about what are our markers for co-design based on our reading and based on these practice experiences that we're showcasing in this webinar. And we looked at 4 areas. I'm going to read you. These are on, so there's a website that we're going to heavily plug in the rest of this webinar, and you'll be able to access. We'll put the address at the end there. It's www.relationalactivism.com, and we've got these principles on the website. There's a lot of material there on the website which you can go and look at. So with Our markers for co-design, relationships making the difference. So we're thinking that, it's got to be about relationships creating the conditions for change. Compassionate, humane relationships help achieve positive change in the worlds we can touch. That change propels wider social change when individual actions combine and are collectively felt. And leaders, both leaders with lived and learned experience, who believe that person-to-person connections can keep us from being stuck in complex social problems and that we are the system. And surfacing power, this is a good one from our friend and colleague Becca Dove, and that's about it being important to acknowledge that communities, children and families, they have power already actually, and the way that we relate, the way that we build relationships with them, the way that we feel and think and act in human services can lift that power to the surface. And so we're interested in that repositioning work, the projects that can help us think about sharing and surfacing power, reimagining power in our relationships with people, and working outside of those kind of formal hierarchies of our organisations, and looking for leadership everywhere, leadership in the community, leadership from people with lived experience. And there's a power in us collectively coming together. And so being able to share spaces, share some of those proprietary spaces of the local authority, some of our civic buildings, for one thing, is an important one. But being able to open up space, facilitate space, but to step into the community with some confidence as a council officer or social worker or family worker, and confidence that having the important conversations is worth doing, and how we facilitate those spaces and how we're inclusive in that is a key part of that skill set that we have as facilitators and relational activists. And finally, building trust. So we interested in participating in collective action. We're interested in, as we saw in those films from Baines, interested in that dynamic between the community and our councils or our services, and so working together to connect with others with explicit about those values, explicit about a call for justice, about restorative, repairing harm. And we've got this slogan which we'll see later in the practice segment, "To love is to act," and that's become a slogan for our work and our form of relational activism, where we're looking at combining with others and using relationships as a locus for the change, and reaching out and changing that part of the world, the part of our systems that we can affect day by day. So we're interested in paying back in, contributing, and having a watch on contribution rather than extracting from the people we're working with and communities.
So we can think about what co-design is, and Tim's just spoke about that there, and we can also think about what co-design is not. So co-design is not a one-off event. It's a process. Developing services takes a lot of time. It's also not a consultation whereby professionals ask users their opinion on a kind of limited number of pre-identified solutions. So you kind of invite some parents in or a group of users and ask them about a specific issue, extract that knowledge and then use it to your own ends or to the service's own ends. That's not co-design. Co-design doesn't exclude professional experience, expertise or knowledge. Instead, it changes the power so that the professional's perspective can be balanced with the user's perspective. So it multiplies insight and generates a kind of collective energy and a collective intelligence. Co-design is not just about talking about issues, it does require taking action. And finally, and this is quite an important point, it's not about absolving responsibility and encouraging self-reliant service users. It's about developing genuine partnerships and sharing power and resources to build more impactful, localized and sustainable solutions.
Thanks, Rich. And we've got some thinking points for co-design again on the website. I'll develop some of those points now. And to start with, this is another lovely one from Kellyanne McKercher about love and co-design going hand in hand. We can't elevate the voices and contributions of people with lived experience if we don't see and champion their wisdom and resilience. And I think, working in a wholehearted way and being explicit about our values and talking about love is something that we're interested in. So some of the, to develop further some of the reading and the ideas around co-design, I think that the group, what language we're using with each other, how we're acknowledging the team and the members of the team is important, and noting and crediting people with knowledge, and that knowledge as well as leadership can come from different participants at different times, and that people with lived experience have that expertise on their own life, which is a real asset. We found, and McKercher highlights this in her book, that using metaphor can be useful for co-design, and this idea of a bridge between the life world of communities, which is fluid and dynamic, and the service world, which is more structured, can be a useful way to think about co-design processes and working with people. I think the third one there about space is so important. This is Adrienne Marie Brown, a community organizer in the US, and her contention that everybody's got a right to the space, and that there should be equality in that space is very important. It reminds me of some feedback that we got for a workshop recently, where parents saying that they felt listened to, but they also felt that their view was valid against and across equally with the professionals and other people in the room, and that felt like a really important bit of feedback. And it's exciting. I liked what a parent was saying earlier. Was it about a funniness, Rich?
She's funny and she wants a funny life.
I thought that was brilliant, and I mean it really makes the point here about energy and fun and creativity. And I think we know when we've done that work, we've been in those spaces with people, we've been alongside people, we've been with people on those journeys. As Rich said, the process is as important as the outcome, and having fun along the way is really a lovely part of it. And when there's energy in the room, when there's creativity, I think fun follows close behind. And this piece of work brilliant piece of work from Goldsmiths, and this Newtown Culture in partnership with Barking and Dagenham, and they produced this report and talked about the attending to the occasion of co-design and working with people in the ceremony. And I think that's a nice one. We in Camden, we were really energized when parents and citizens from the community started coming in to these civic spaces, our council office, our big corporate office in King's Cross. Parents started coming into that space, and we started organising events and shared activities, life story workshops, and it seemed to us that they were bringing a certain disruptive element sometimes, but noise and fun and creativity, but also there was a big dollop of hope in there as well. So this sense of these the system world again, and the life world, and the system world with these proprietary spaces, which have their certain ways and formulas, and you engage in some co-design work, which is more unpredictable and disruptive, but also can bring hope and fresh ideas and change to the ways in which we work. And we credit Seth Oliver and 4 Bars for that thought around hopeful disruption. And when you got the disruption, you get the discomfort sometimes. I like this from, I mean, everybody knows the number of cringeworthy workshops and pieces of work that I've done over the years, things that haven't gone quite correct. I remember one time I was organising a community meeting with some people and a housing association, and I brought a lot of kind of foam blocks, and I had this idea that they were going to sort of construct this house together out of these foam blocks, and this was going to be this sort of amazing, you know, like restorative moment, and it just kind of went a bit swervy, and the kids and teenagers did throw the foam blocks around a bit. There's a bit of hopeful disruption maybe, but they certainly didn't conform to my fixed idea of how I thought the session would go, and I kind of had to live with that failure, but I think I learned through that process as well. And we've quoted one of our own articles here, myself and Becca Dove, writing about relational activism, which you can also see on the website. And I think story is so important. We've had a thread in Camden circulating stories on a Friday, and so stories for both for the practitioner or council officer and for the person in the community, sharing stories, kind of being vulnerable together, offering that compassionate listening and space for shared learning is a really nice one. And we're writing up this webinar and sharing this research with you, but we're also going to share some stories of practice, so look out for that on the social media channels and on the website. Rich.
So back to a bit more of a technical bit, although this is the final part now. This is the UK's Design Council's Double Diamond, and they've also got a really useful website, and there's variations in the design process, but most tend to include the following: discover and explore. That's the first stage. The second is to refine and define. The third is to develop solutions, and then the fourth is to deliver solutions. And so I'll just briefly touch upon those four stages. In the first stage, an exploration is undertaken to understand the problem, essentially, or Hilary Cottam describes it as frame the problem, find the opportunity. Thinking of books to recommend, her book Radical Help I would probably add to the list as well. And so at this point, curiosity and understanding the issues from multiple perspectives is critical, and creating a safe, supportive and participatory context is required to enable maximum participation of all in attendance. And this comes back to some of the principles that Tim's touched upon, especially around hospitality. And hospitality is both a kind of relational and a practical element. So relationally, it involves kind of users feeling invited and welcomed into the space. So knowing a familiar name or a face and being supported to contribute to the discussions. And practically, it means that consideration is given to the venue's location, transport, childcare, ensuring that their physical needs are met and things like that. And also just being aware, I suppose, of the role that power plays in reinforcing certain relational inequalities. So professionals in these kind of spaces being aware of what they're wearing, you know, symbols of professionalism like a notepad and a name tag, etc., are all markers that can sometimes create divisions. So yeah, creating a space is a really critical element to this first stage. And in the second stage, you start to transition into refining and defining the concern. And that just might be a natural consequence of the former step, because there's often a relationship between the framing of the problem and identifying the solution. And then in the third stage, ideas are generated about how and who can solve the problem. And at this stage, all ideas are considered indiscriminately. That, you know, there's an open-ended consideration to what might be done in order to resolve some of the difficulties. And then in the final stage, an idea is selected and funding secured, and an implementation plan is to be developed and enacted. And so that's just a kind of brief overview of the process of co-design.
Thanks, Rich. That's really interesting. And we've got now a little piece of film for you. And so this is Michael Redhead Champagne, who's an activist from Indigenous heritage in North America and Canada. And he's got a really vivid exposition on lived experience and the importance of lived experience in our system. So we're going to play a bit of this, and then Rich can tell me if the sound is coming through good.
Invited to sit at the table. So I have a model that I'm going to do. So if you're somebody who likes to draw things, you're gonna love this. This is something that I call the circle of power and influence. All right, and how it works is it's essentially, oh man, my marker isn't working here. Here's another one. How it works is we take folks that have lived experience and we center them. We give them power and we give them influence. So here's the first stage. Step one, people with lived experience. All right, why are they right in the middle here? Well, they're right in the middle because they should, in theory, have the most power and influence over programming, systems, services that affect them. All right, but lived experience people, it's not right or fair for us to be expecting people that have been intergenerationally affected by these systems to solve all the system's problems without support. And so we know, I'm going to switch colors here. So we know that it's important for us to include individuals that have that lived experience but have been able to get out of that lifestyle. So maybe if you're somebody involved, for example, in child welfare, maybe you grew up, or maybe you got your kids back. All right, and so the next circle that we have here is former. So those are people who have former lived experience. They're on the next ring out, and what that means is they have a little bit less power and influence than people that have current lived experience, but they're absolutely essential. And why they're essential is because these people that have the lived experience but have been able to progress, I guess, or move beyond that particular experience are essentially becoming the bridge that we need for the final ring. So here's the final ring. Final ring, all along the outside here, are people that do not have lived experience. So I'm gonna call them the non-lived experience people. They're on the outside. All right, and why are they on the outside? Because when we are designing services for people that have been so impacted by systems, so frequently people that are non-experiential have all the power, all the resources, all the support, they direct everything. But if you take this model, this circle of power and influence, you can invert that. And what it requires is that people that are non-experiential to willingly give up their power. I know they say that folks with power will never willingly give it up, but this is exactly what I'm asking you to do here. All right, so folks that are non-experiential have to give their power to people with lived experience, but how do they do that? How convenient. We have this whole group of former lived experience people that can be the bridge. So this is the circle of power and influence, all right? And when I'm working with folks from my neighborhood people are in the center. When I work with young people aging out of care, they're in the center. When I work with Indigenous people, they're in the center, all right? And this model works all the time, but it's all about centering lived experience.
There we go, all about centering lived experience, and the wonderful Michael Redhead Champagne. And you can find that that film if you search Michael Redhead Champagne on YouTube, or if you search for relational activism, then you'll be able to find it.
It's really worth watching. Yeah.
It's
one to watch.
There's a 13-minute film there. It's a good one. Okay, well, you're gonna, for the third part now, talk about co-design in Camden. And I guess thinking about it, there's some specific examples there of co-design process. And I'm also talking to the conditions as well, the conditions for co-design. So there's both of those things in there. So this is the wonderful Carmen from an early member of the Family Advisory Board in Camden talking, and she's echoing, I think the point we wanted to make here is that got to start with listening, got to start with respect and recognition of people with lived experience, got to start with those conversations in the community. This is a graphic here which shows some ways of being. So thinking if you're a person that worked in the council or a role in the council, then what are your ways of being? What do you need to do to connect, to facilitate, to open up these spaces for co-design? And so there's some ideas there, but I think there's something more overarching and fundamental when you're talking about a team and building a team for co-design and looking forward, creating a vision for future, for people's preferred futures. And there are some attributes, when you start to meet with people, there are some attributes, that person that is a bonder, if that's the right term, that is like that social glue, that when a group of people come together, they settle people down, people feel comfortable. There may be a storyteller. Those people are really, really important. And there's some, interests and some perhaps skills as well. So, for example, when we did the Camden Conversations piece of work, which we will show in a moment in film, there were some interviewers there. So people, parents that were interested in interviewing and were curious and wanted to get out there and ask questions. There's some interest there in the team, in that mix. And then there's turning some of that passion about wanting to make a change, about wanting to see a different system, turning that into operational roles. And so maybe this is further towards the further on in the co-design journey, but we've seen in Camden people come, be listened to, take part in the what we call the FAB group, the Family Advisory Board, and some of those conversations, and then take that on and then get involved in projects and parts, and then start to be part of that human resource that is changing the system. So paid advocates, Jordell Bennett, Carmen Ayu, Kevin Mack, peer researchers, Carmen Ayu, Chris Stevens in Camden Conversations, national parent champions, Annie from Surviving Safeguarding, Tammy Mays, and family group conferencing as well, family group conference facilitators. And so moving through co-designing services, but then moving into turning that passion into operational roles that are making a difference. And Camden's peer parent support partners, peer advocacy offer, moved through a co-design phase into that the operational phase it is in now, making a difference for people. And there's more information about that on our website and another webinar that we did on parent advocacy. And I think we've identified ourselves as relational activists, and that's a nice kind of use of language, and that language is important, and descriptions we give ourselves, and the sort of origins of that were around us thinking, and Carissa Stevens, a Camden parent in particular, had this notion that she wanted to make a difference in the system. She didn't necessarily want to be outside the council office or outside the family court waving a banner, although she said if it came to it, she would. But she was creative and she wanted to make a difference, and she saw herself as making that difference through relationships, changing the part of the system that she could touch, influencing the people that she talked to, and taking those actions day by day to make a difference. And so we started identifying as relational activists, and you can see more information about that on the website. And I think circles are important. A lot of people talking about circles, and they're an ancient thing, aren't they? Like an ancient way of sitting together, appreciating people, listening, making decisions, thinking about the future. And we've got 3 circles picked out there on that slide. Up on the top right hand corner is a photograph of the Family Advisory Board, and this was 9 years ago on the in the Salvation Army, originally in Chalk Farm. We just started having sitting down, meeting with people, having a coffee, and hearing about their experiences of the child protection system. So a really, really simple thing of being in the space and listening and talking. And the Family Advisory Board developed from there. Many projects and co-design processes were spun out of that. The big photo there is of the Relationships Making a Difference events. That was energizing, because that involved a bigger group of people and a wide group of people, representatives from the system in different ways, senior managers, people with lived experience, Camden citizens, social workers, policy people, academics coming together and talking and listening and thinking together about how we could collectively work to make a better system. I mentioned earlier in our markers for co-design around this to love is to act, and that intention to bring love into our work and to take actions that help directly help people in communities. And you can see the banner there, the banner that we've been speaking under and taking many places. That's that photo on the bottom right. So let's take us directly to an example of co-design in Camden, and it's the Camden Conversations and Participatory Research. You can see they're credited Annie from Surviving Safeguarding, Anna Gupta from Professor Anna Gupta from Royal Holloway, were national figures that supported the research and helped in the research design. And it was co-designed with local parents in Camden. And it was a family-led child protection inquiry that came up with some recommendations about changing child protection in Camden. I'll play the film and you can see these. So these are people, parents, social workers, others, talking about their experience and reflecting directly on their experience of co-design in Camden. So have a little look at this.
I felt that my input was not only being heard, but was being truly listened to for the good of others.
As we say all the time, meaningful relationships are built upon trust and listening. And it's only through working together and taking that feedback on board that we can challenge the stigma attached to social workers in the community.
Like many other parents, I knew I wanted child protection to feel more supportive and less scary.
I feel that there is fear on both sides. So if we can get through this fear, we can move forward together positively.
I found this experience to be quite humbling.
I felt it was important for me, as a parent with experience, to be doing the interviews so I could ask the right questions and help the family members feel comfortable.
Through this review, we're opening up the feedback loop and publicising the views of families, and also being clear about how we're going to respond. In doing so, we're being accountable. I think that this is a significant step.
I learned so much being involved in this inquiry. It made me realise we have a voice that will be heard.
When people were asked questions during the inquiry, they often gave similar responses. A relationship works well when
you feel comfortable enough to open up and get the help that you need. And when people feel valued and respected,
you feel comfortable with the other person. There's trust and respect.
Camden Child Protection can change by
being human, stopping using words that make no sense to families, breaking boundaries and not being tied by tradition.
Changing the atmosphere, cutting the jargon. Who says it has to be the way it's always been?
children need
Love.
I had success the other day when
Someone showed me genuine care and interest, and someone listened to me and explained to me.
I had a cup of tea with a parent and let them say what they wanted to. With my help, someone understood what was happening.
I think I am
a good person, patient and doing my best.
A good person, kind, trying my best.
in an ideal world, a child protection conference would be
like a safe kitchen, an opportunity for the family to lead the plan, including advocacy.
More comfortable and make me feel less vulnerable, like a family group conference, giving more independent advocates for families.
Okay. So I think what really comes through at the end of that film is that mutual thinking, and that really resonates with me, feels really strong. And I think that's a nice thing in working as a team, working with people in the community, that you can feel that actually there's people have got good intentions on both sides, share a conviction around love and people doing their best. I think there's also, as we've been saying in this webinar, we're finishing up now with this as the final slide on Camden. It's important also that co-design, there's a big opportunity there around diversity as well, the diversity of the people involved, but also diversity of thinking and new ideas and imagination. And here are some of the examples from our work in Camden, some of which we've already talked about. And you can see the Camden office there, the mosaic on the top of the building, which is the Camden motto, not for self, but for all. And I wanted just to pick out one final image and tell one final story for you. And it's the image there of the dandelion. And we were doing some work with some people in Telford, a group of parents. It's a brilliant principal social worker there, Louise Spragg, and also Chris Thursfield, who manages the Strengthening Families programme there. And we had an opportunity to go up and do some work with some parents, and we had I guess in a fancy way, you would say it was a visioning exercise, sort of thinking about that group of parents, what change they wanted to make, what was their preferred future for themselves, their families and services in Telford. And we were going round the circle, inviting people to say in one word how they felt, and a tricky thing to do in itself. And there was a father there, Daniel, beautiful man. And he said, "Oh, I've got a word, but I'm not sure if it's the correct word. I'm not sure if I'm getting this exercise right." And we said, "Oh no, go on. What's your word? What are you thinking?" And he said that others had said, "Oh, empowering or advocacy or ambassador in a future vision." And Daniel said his word was dandelion. We were like, "Oh, okay, dandelion. That's interesting." And then he pulled out this notebook and he'd written a poem. He'd written something about dandelion, that for him was symbolic of the future for himself, for his family and the group. So this is a good example of how, when you work with people, They can bring ideas and language and concepts and metaphor, even that are beyond the imagination of individual or professionals and services. So I'll finish with the dandelion poem. So this is credit to Daniel. Dandelion clock flower, any child's joy. They grow firm, their seeds tight. When they're ready, they know the wind blows, and strengthened by each other, the wind on the child's breath sets them about their task. Becoming new flowers, strength again gathered like the seeds. The seeds know all that will come and use all that they learned to encourage the new.
Wow. It's a beautiful poem.
Fun, isn't it? So thank you, Daniel. And Rich, well, we've come to the end of the webinar. We appreciate people that have watched it and been there with us until the end. Got some information here, haven't we?
Yeah, thanks to everybody, and you know, please, if you have any questions or queries, don't ever hesitate to get in touch with either of us. We answer to 100% of the emails that we get about this, and we're quite passionate about co-design and some of the principles that we've talked about today. And so anything that we can do to support or facilitate that for anybody, yeah, we'd love to hear from you. And I really hope as well that some of the projects that we've talked about look like they have a lot of involvement, but there's lots of little ways that you can implement co-design principles and ideas into your day-to-day practice. So, for example, one of the ideas after I read Hilary Cotham's book Radical Help was it sounds kind of deceptively simple, but when I now work with a family, I ask them, if you were to have any type of help, the ideal type of help, what would that look like? And then I try and think about how we can organise the services around their needs rather than imposing pre-existing services onto the family. So there's lots of ways that we can work individually, but also the power really comes when you collaborate and connect with others and try and bring parents into the conversation.
I agree, and I think we're talking here about perhaps a brave approach, an artful one, creative one, and a wholehearted one with values on our sleeve. But it's a shared thing. So that bravery will come from the parent that steps into that space, comes to the meeting you've organised. That creativity will come from a parent like Daniel that has an idea that's a brilliant one. It is a scary thing sometimes, and people talk about it being relational risk taking. It can be a risk, and there can be some discomfort. But if we do it genuinely, collaboratively with people, then we're sharing the burden of that, of the new ideas and of the discomfort. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.